The alien's eyes pulsed with a dim, bluish hue, rippling like oil over water in the low-lit corridor of the diplomatic hangar. Its voice was a slurry of wet friction and modulation run through the translator hanging from its shoulder. It leaned slightly toward the human, its long upper limbs folded neatly in front of its chest. You must not approach the predator, Daniel. It is not acclimated to your species. It may mistake you for prey. Daniel Decker didn't flinch. He stood beside the massive enclosure, a glass wall separating him from the hulking creature resting on the other side. The alien called Varn hovered nervously a few steps behind him, its translucent skin flickering shades of concern. The creature inside the pen stirred, rising onto thick hind limbs that flexed with slow, deliberate power. Her bright eyes blinked in unison. Its deep, rhythmic breathing fogged a small patch of glass as it stepped closer, tail dragging like a length of steel cable behind it. Daniel grinned. "I've seen worse at an Arkansas petting zoo," he muttered. He stepped forward, palm flat against the glass. Varn twitched. The creature tilted its head, then slowly, almost cautiously pressed its nose against the other side of the glass, mirroring Daniel's hand. "It is not domesticated," Varn said, more urgently now. The Zarnex Predator is a hybrid apex lifeform. 6 species were culled to construct it. It was bred for war. Even our own handlers require suppressants and neural dampeners to avoid triggering aggression. Daniel turned his head toward Varn, one brow raised. "You're telling me this thing's dangerous because it was made to be?" he asked. Varn hesitated. "Yes." Daniel nodded slowly, then looked back at the beast. It gave a low, almost dog-like huff from its throat. Then, with a suddenness that made Varn tense, Daniel stepped around to the access console and keyed in a request to open the airlock. Varn's limbs snapped up. "Daniel, no." It will. The outer door hissed open and warm, recycled air from the enclosure spilled into the hallway. A heavy silence followed. Daniel stepped inside. The predator watched him, unblinking. Its posture was still, but not rigid. Then it sniffed the air and lowered its body slightly, as if waiting. Daniel moved slowly, one hand extended. "Easy, big guy," he said quietly. "Let's not make a scene." Varn leaned in, whispering harshly through the comm, "You will be torn apart. It does not understand restraint." Daniel crouched, letting the creature come to him. It approached on all fours now, each step deliberate, silent. Then it stopped just a foot away. Its nostrils flared. Daniel reached up and gently patted the side of its massive head. "Who's a good boy?" he said, voice light. The predator blinked. Then it exhaled, a long, rumbling breath that vibrated the floor. Varn made a sound that was either astonishment or horror. "It should have attacked. Its instincts, maybe it likes me," Daniel said, still scratching gently behind what looked like an ear ridge. The creature rumbled again, then sat, tail curling neatly around its legs. It lowered its head and closed its eyes. Varn stood paralyzed. Daniel looked over his shoulder. "Well," he said, "guess I'm not prey." Word of the incident spread through the diplomatic station faster than a gas leak through a vent shaft. Within hours, a handful of other species requested observation rights. A few even demanded tests, theorizing that Daniel might emit pheromones or possess some unknown frequency of neural rhythm that pacified the predator. Daniel said it was just good vibes. The station's command staff, however, weren't laughing. Commander Resco, a squat, leathery-skinned being with a permanent scowl, summoned Daniel to the main briefing chamber within the hour. "You violated containment protocols," Resco snapped, pacing across the platform. "I made contact, yeah?" Daniel said, seated casually with one hand still smelling faintly of the predator's breath. The Zarnex Predator was never intended for human interaction. Your actions were reckless. If not for the creature's inexplicable reaction, you'd be in medbay if not a body bag. Daniel leaned back. "Maybe someone ought to look into why it didn't react the way you thought it would." Resco's nostrils flared. "We are. You're under psychological observation until further notice." Daniel shrugged. "Sure, but I want to see it again." Resco blinked. "Absolutely not." Daniel rose. "Then good luck finding out why it didn't eat me." He left the chamber before Resco could respond. The next week was a blur of scans, interviews, and biometric readings. Daniel submitted to every test without protest. He'd been a xenobiologist before joining the diplomatic service, so he understood the importance of data. But what puzzled him was that none of it explained the interaction. No pheromone anomalies. No neural emissions. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except the predator kept responding to him. Each time he entered the enclosure, it would approach, sit, and wait. Sometimes it would nudge him gently. Once, it brought him a piece of scrap metal like a dog with a toy. Daniel laughed so hard he nearly cried. But the laughter stopped the day the predator saved his life. Daniel had been scheduled to observe a simulated combat exercise involving a pair of robotic drones in the adjacent training bay. He stood near the observation window while technicians ran diagnostics. The exercise began and the two drones launched into a structured melee. But something went wrong. One of the drone's targeting systems glitched and it fired a high-velocity dart into the observation bay. Daniel didn't see it coming. The glass exploded. He was thrown backward, a sharp pain ripping through his side. Blood soaked his shirt. Then came a snarl. The predator had broken through its containment. No alarms. No damage reports. One moment it was in its pen, the next it was standing over Daniel, growling at the drone. With a single leap, it crushed the machine into the wall, tearing it apart with a frightening ease. Daniel faded in and out of consciousness. In the blur, he remembered the creature nosing at his face, whimpering like a worried animal. Then darkness took him. He woke 2 days later in the medical wing. His side was stitched, ribs cracked but not broken. He'd need about a month to recover. Varn visited him on the 3rd day. "You were fortunate," Varn said, standing awkwardly by the bed. "Had the drone struck higher, your heart would have been pierced." Daniel winced as he adjusted on the bed. "Lucky me." Varn hesitated. The predator broke through reinforced containment. No alarms triggered. No structural damage was found. It simply left. Daniel frowned. There was no breach? None. It acted with intent. It protected you. Daniel studied the ceiling. "Maybe it thinks I'm part of the pack." Varn tilted its head slightly. It was never designed to form bonds. Not even with its handlers. Silence passed between them. Finally, Varn said, "We are no longer certain it is a predator." Daniel turned to face him. "You mean it might be more than that?" "We mean it may be evolving." 2 weeks later, Daniel walked unaided again, though his movements were slow and stiff. He returned to the enclosure, now reinforced with additional safety protocols. The creature greeted him as it always did, silently, patiently, with a low purr as Daniel entered. He sat down in the center of the room. The creature approached and curled beside him. Daniel looked up at the observation window, saw Varn watching. "I think you misnamed this thing," Daniel said. Varn's voice crackled through the intercom. "What would you call it?" Daniel scratched behind the creature's ear ridge again. "Friend." The creature's paw was the size of Daniel's torso and currently resting across his leg with all the casual weight of a misplaced airlock door. He shifted, trying to free himself without waking it. But the beast made a low, almost contented exhale and adjusted slightly, pinning him worse. "This is undignified," Daniel muttered. From the far side of the enclosure, a tall figure stepped through the decontamination veil, carrying a small case. It was shaped like an inverted triangle, with arms that folded inward at the joints like a praying mantis. Its skin shimmered in dappled patterns of green and violet, and its eyes were narrow slits beneath a hardened brow ridge. "You are pinned," it observed. "No kidding," Daniel said. "You must be Drow. You the behavioral specialist?" Drow crouched beside the creature, setting the case down. "I analyze emergent cognition in nonlinear intelligence clusters. This organism now qualifies." "Nice. So, is it gonna move, or am I going to lose feeling in both legs?" Drow placed 2 fingers on the creature's neck. It twitched slightly but didn't stir. "It is in a quasi-somnolent state," Drow said. "Not asleep. Not alert. It is. Listening." "To what?" Drow didn't answer. Instead, it opened the case and removed a device that looked like a cross between a flute and a spinal column. It pressed the end to its throat and emitted a series of low, undulating tones. The creature's ears flicked. Is that safe? Daniel asked. I mean, just asking before it decides to get up and jog a few laps with me still under it. It is not for the creature, Drell said. It is for you. Daniel blinked. Come again. Your brain operates with high tolerance for ambiguity. You adapt to incomplete patterns by generating emotional resonance. This tone primes your limbic system to match the creature's neural rest state. Like syncing heartbeats? Cruder than that, Drell said. But yes, the goal is to prevent misalignment. Daniel rested his head back against the padded wall. You know, I used to think I had weird coworkers. Now I'm being harmonized with a war beast by a multi-limbed alien therapist. Drell paused. You find this humorous? No offense. I find most of my life hilarious these days. Helps keep the bones from vibrating out of my skin. Drell tilted its head. Your species uses laughter to metabolize emotional dissonance, among other things. The creature shifted again, this time rolling slightly to the side. Daniel managed to slide out from under the paw and sat up, rubbing his thighs. Better, he muttered. I was starting to feel like a mattress. Drell was scanning the creature's flank with a small handheld probe that emitted short bursts of light. The creature didn't react. Its metabolism has slowed, Drell said, but not due to fatigue or sedation. It is mimicking your circadian rhythm. Daniel frowned. That's not possible. It should not be, yet it is. He stood, stretching cautiously. His torso ached, still tight beneath the bandages. The medics had done a field suture on the wound, but he'd had to go back 3 days later when the site began to swell. Now the area itched like hell. Drell watched him carefully. You have not fully recovered. Tell me something I don't know. Your movement is asymmetrical, favoring the right side. You compensate to avoid strain. Daniel stopped mid-stretch. Do you have a background in medicine too, or are you just a fan of unsolicited advice? I observe. It is my function. He exhaled and leaned against the wall. The creature's eyes fluttered open, one at a time. It looked toward Daniel, then slowly sat up, yawning wide enough to reveal rows of teeth that could shear a bulkhead. Morning sunshine, Daniel said. The creature patted over and sniffed his side with exaggerated caution, then gave a soft grunt. Yeah, still sore. Thanks for the concern. Drell was taking notes on a wrist-mounted display. It is monitoring your recovery. Feels more like babysitting. No, it is assessing viability. Daniel blinked. Viability for what? Drell didn't answer. The creature nudged Daniel's hip with its nose. Well, that's not ominous, Daniel murmured. He turned to Drell. Okay, so what do you all actually want from me? I mean, I get that this thing likes me. Maybe too much. But what's the plan? Drell paused, then stood. Observation. Nothing more. Right? Because that's how interstellar diplomacy usually works. Throw a guy in a pen with a bioweapon and see what happens. You volunteered. I didn't know I was volunteering to be adopted. Drell's eyes narrowed. Do you wish to be removed? Daniel looked at the creature, now curled again at his feet. No, he said finally. I just want to understand. Drell reached into its case and withdrew a small, clear capsule filled with a viscous amber fluid. This is a neural dye, it said. If you permit, we will skim both your brain and the organisms simultaneously. We believe your cognitive patterns may be linked. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You think we're syncing up? There are indicators of neural resonance. We cannot confirm without direct interface. He hesitated. Is it safe? Marginally. I was hoping for a yes. Drell held out the capsule. Daniel took it, studied it, then nodded. Let's see what's going on in there. 2 hours later, he was lying on a padded slab in the station's neuroimaging bay. A series of fine electrodes adhered to his scalp. The creature was in the adjacent imaging chamber, resting on a modified support platform. Both were connected by a coil of translucent conduit filled with the same amber liquid. Varn stood behind a glass partition flanked by 2 other observers. None of them spoke. Daniel stared up at the ceiling as a low hum filled the room. Is this going to hurt? He asked. No, came Drow's voice from the intercom. But you may experience disorientation. The lights dimmed. A series of pulsing colors played across the ceiling. Daniel felt a gentle warmth spreading through his skull like sunlight just beneath the skin. The hum deepened. Somewhere just outside the edge of hearing, a tone repeated low and circular as if it were folding into itself. His vision blurred. Then something strange happened. He wasn't in the room anymore. He stood in a wide, open field beneath a violet sky. The sun was low, no, not a sun. A ringed object hung in the atmosphere, casting long shadows over tall, swaying grass. The air had weight. Not pressure, but emotion. Something like memory, but not his own. A shape moved beside him. The creature. Only it wasn't quite the same. It was larger, somehow more defined. Its eyes met his, and in that moment he understood not in language, but in sensation. Loss. Loneliness. The ache of purpose without direction. Then warmth. Recognition. A bond not created, but chosen. He blinked. The ceiling returned. The hum faded. The lights brightened. He sat up slowly, head swimming. Drow was already entering the chamber. What the hell was that? You experienced a shared construct, Drow said. Projected from the organism's memory lattice. It allowed partial access through your emotional framework. Daniel swallowed. That field. That sky. It wasn't Earth. No. It was the habitat where the organism was first matured. It retains imprint memory. He looked over at the creature, now watching him with calm intensity. It was alone there, Daniel said. Yes, until now. Daniel stood, still unsteady. It wasn't bred for war. Drow hesitated. No, it said. It was bred for obedience. War was only the application. Daniel looked down at his hands. They were shaking. You were all wrong about it. Drow's voice was low. We often are. Later that night, Daniel sat in his quarters, staring out the viewport at the drifting stars. He hadn't eaten. His appetite had vanished somewhere between the vision and the scan results. A soft chime signaled a message. He ignored it. The stars didn't care what species you were, or how you were made. They swallowed everyone the same. But somewhere in that vast silence, a creature had chosen him not because it was programmed to, or because he manipulated it, but because, in a moment of pain, he had extended a hand. And somehow that had been enough. The creature's breath was warm against Daniel's neck, not unpleasant, more like the draft of a laundry vent on a cold day. It had curled behind him on the floor of the observation dome, which wasn't designed for habitation, let alone cohabitation with a biological tank the size of a studio apartment. But Daniel had refused to return to the medbay until the creature was cleared of neurological instability. That meant staying close. It was hour 37 inside the dome. Rations had been dropped off, bland, nutrient-rich, and suspiciously gray, but Daniel had barely touched them. He was seated on a floor mat, legs folded stiffly, scribbling notes onto a disposable tablet. The stylus tapped occasionally as he paused to think. You are agitated, said the voice behind the glass. Varn stood in the adjoining control room, its appendages clasped behind its elongated back. A new observer stood beside it, smaller, cloaked, and featureless except for a vertical seam where a face might be. Daniel hadn't asked for names anymore. They kept changing. Not agitated. Focused, Daniel said without looking up. You have been writing for 3 standard cycles without rest. That's because you people don't sleep at normal intervals. I'm sticking to my own schedule. The new observer pressed a node on the console, and a narrow beam of blue light swept down from the ceiling, scanning the creature's spine. It didn't stir. Daniel finally looked up. You're still not using inhibitors? No longer necessary, Varn replied. It has adjusted to ambient stimuli. No signs of defensive response. That's the 3rd full scan today. It's going to notice eventually. The new observer's voice was filtered through a tonal vocoder. Unlikely. It interprets the beam as environmental light fluctuation. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's oddly specific. I designed the sequence, it said. He returned to his notes. Then design it to stop interrupting my train of thought. The observer turned away without responding. Daniel's back ached. He leaned forward, stretching slowly, then glanced at the creature. Its eyes were open now, watching with the stillness of a camera lens. He set the tablet down and reached for a small object beside him, a worn, synthetic ball filled with weighted gel. He held it up. Catch. He tossed it underhand. The creature's front limbs snapped up with uncanny precision, catching it midair. It held the ball for a moment, then extended its paw and dropped it gently back into Daniel's lap. Not bad, Daniel said. But next time, let it bounce first. Varn spoke again. You are intentionally reinforcing behavior. I'm engaging it. You are anthropomorphizing. Daniel sighed. So what if I am? You ever think maybe it's anthropomorphizing me? Varn paused. That would imply conceptual abstraction. It does. I've seen it make decisions based on context. It adapts to subtle cues, not just commands. The observer turned back to the panel. Its cortical activity has shifted. Higher levels of temporal lobe response. Emotion regulation. Delayed reaction to threat indicators. Daniel stood slowly, joints stiff. You're saying it's calming down? I am saying it is learning to choose calm. He walked to the creature and sat beside it, resting his hand on the thick fur along its shoulder. The creature didn't move. You know, Daniel said, when I first saw it, I thought you'd all built a nightmare. Something designed to terrify everything it met. We did, said Varn. He looked up. Then why would it choose to be gentle? That question is why we continue to observe. There was a long silence. The creature blinked slowly. Daniel broke it. Its hearing's been reacting to my heartbeat. Confirmed, said the observer. It uses auditory mapping to track your physical state. It recognizes irregularity. Daniel rubbed his ribs. It knows I'm still not fully healed. The observer stepped closer to the glass. We believe it compensates for your vulnerability. Its proximity increases when your biometrics spike. So it's watching my stress levels? It is buffering them. Daniel turned his head, resting it against the creature's side. That's not a war machine. That's a caretaker. Varn approached the window, limbs unfolding slightly. We never gave it a choice until now. Daniel felt sleep tugging at his eyelids. He hadn't intended to nap, but the creature's warmth was persistent and oddly reassuring. His body, still recovering, didn't argue. He awoke later, unsure how much later, to the sound of the dome's outer hatch opening. A technician stepped in, holding a small case. She was human, short, with dark eyes and a shaved scalp. Her uniform bore the medical insignia. I'm here for the clearance check, she said. You were due for a follow-up 12 hours ago. Daniel sat up, blinking. Didn't hear the alert. It's been overruled twice. Varn suggested you wouldn't come unless someone physically showed up. He stood awkwardly, brushing sleep from his pants. Fair. The creature rose as well, standing behind him like a silent shadow. The technician opened the case and removed a portable scanner. Shirt off. Daniel hesitated. You want to do this in front of him? She didn't look up. I've seen worse audiences. He peeled the fabric up slowly, careful around the gauze. The wound had closed, but the area was still discolored, a bruised crescent beneath his ribs. She scanned it, then pressed lightly around the edges. Still tender. Less than yesterday. She nodded. No signs of infection. Tissue healing normally. You'll still feel stiffness for another week. He exhaled. Good. That's the first progress I've had in days. She packed the scanner away and glanced at the creature. It didn't move while I was working. It doesn't see you as a threat. Lucky me. Daniel pulled his shirt back down. Thanks. As she left, Varn's voice returned. We have concluded our study. The organism has demonstrated consistent behavioral deviation from its original design parameters. Daniel looked toward the ceiling. So what happens now? You put it back in containment? Run more tests? No. We will declassify it. He frowned. That's not a word I expected. It will be removed from the registry of active armament. Its designation will be altered to reflect its updated profile. Daniel turned toward the observation room. And me? You are free to return to your diplomatic post. He looked at the creature. It sat calmly, watching him. He crouched beside it, brushing his hand along its side. You hear that? You're retired. The creature gave a low, pleased huff. Final designation, said the observer, will be Companion Class Sentinel. Voluntary bonding permitted under supervision. Daniel smiled. That's a hell of a promotion. We will arrange transport. He stood again, stretching his back slowly. I'm not going anywhere without him. That is permitted. The creature rose and followed as Daniel walked toward the exit. Its footsteps were soundless on the metal floor. Varn remained behind the glass, watching quietly. At the doorway, Daniel paused. You know, he said, you all built it to be a monster. But you never asked what it wanted. Varn lowered its gaze. We assumed it could not want. Daniel nodded once and stepped through the hatch, the creature beside him. Outside the dome, the corridor lights flickered on as they walked. For the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't feel like he was being watched. He felt seen.